You don't need a shop full of tools to start woodworking. I built this plant stand with just a circular saw, a drill, and a few inexpensive jigs. So let me show you how I did it. I picked up a bunch of pressure treated 2x2s and 1x2s to build this plant stand from. And to do all the cutting, I'm going to be using my circular saw and the Kreg crosscut station. Now the one cut that I was a little bit leery of making with the Kreg crosscut station was this long tapered cut at the top of the front legs. Now there is a miter gauge included with this jig, but it's not really intended for making long tapered cuts like I had to do on the front of this plant stand. So what I did was I clamped a piece in place, lined it up by eye, and the cut really came out great. On the other end of the front leg, there's a corresponding angle, and that one was super easy to cut because I could use the included miter gauge. Okay, so here's a quick pro tip for you. Whenever you're cutting multiple pieces, this is also known as gang cutting, whenever you're doing this, clamp the pieces together, trim up one end, make your measurement, and then cut everything to length at once. With all the 2x2s knocked out, I now switch gears and I start cutting those 1x2s. And there you see, again, I'm gang cutting all these pieces. I think I'm cutting something like 8 at a time. So it really speeds up the process and just ensures a little bit more accuracy. Kreg offers a pretty wide variety of different pocket hole jigs and machines. And for this project, I'm using the 520. So I have the jig set up for 1.5 inch material, but I have the drill set up for 3/4 inch material. And that's because 2x2s are actually 1.25 inches square, not 1.5 by 1.5. So with this combination of settings, I was able to use 2-inch pocket hole screws to secure all of the 2x2s together. Now when it comes time to drill pocket holes into the 1x2s, I'm changing the jig to the 3/4 inch material thickness. I'm leaving the drill at the same spot and just go to town. Alright, just a quick heads up. Since this is an exterior project and I'm using pressure treated lumber, I'm screwing this project together with Kreg's stainless steel or blue coat pocket hole screws. Once the frame is assembled, I measure across the corners to check for square. And basically, if these two measurements are equal, then I know the frame is square and I'm ready to move on. I set all of the slats on a scrap piece of 1/2-inch plywood, so that way the slats are right where I want them to be in the frame. And then I screw them into place using a spacer to keep an even spacing between each one of the slats. Each one of the shelves is assembled the same way that the back was put together. The only difference is when it comes time to put in the slats. Instead of a 1/2-inch piece of plywood, I'm using a 1/4 inch thick piece of plywood, and the spacers are a little bit different as well. Now, if you don't happen to have any fancy spacers or setup blocks, don't worry about that. You can always make your own out of some scrap plywood or a scrap 2x4 or something like that. While I finished slapping these shelves together, I wanted to take a quick minute and just say thank you so much for watching, supporting me over the years, and just making this channel what it is. I obviously wouldn't be here without you, so sincerely just thank you for all of your encouragement and watching over the years. With the back and all the shelves assembled, I go ahead and head outside to finish everything. I'm doing this now rather than once the entire plant stand is together, just because it's going to be a lot easier to apply the finish when everything is in flat pieces rather than once it's put together and I'm having to stand on my head to get the underside of those shelves. I let the stain dry overnight, and the next morning I go ahead and I start final assembly. I'm wearing some black gloves just because the stain is not fully cured and I don't want to have stain all over my hands for the rest of the day because that stuff doesn't wash out super easy. For the final assembly, I'm drilling some counterbore holes using the Kreg quick flip, and then I'm using pocket hole screws inside of those counterbore holes to bring everything together. I know you're probably dying to know if there are plans for this plant stand, and there are. So if you want to build a plant stand like this, grab the plans that are linked in the description below. And you will be glad to know that 100% of the proceeds go to support my family. Thank you. To install the middle and top shelves, I set up a handful of clamps to support the back side of the shelf, and then I clamp the front side with a clamp across those two legs to squeeze everything and hold it in place. Okay, real quick, I want to take a minute and show you how I'm using this Bessie trigger clamp to support the backside of those shelves while I'm screwing them into place. So these are the EHK XL clamps that come in a variety of different lengths, but what's cool about them is that instead of only being able to clamp something like this, you can actually remove this top part. So you push this red button in and it'll slide off the end, and then you turn the clamp around and now you can slide it onto the bottom, push that button back in place, and now your clamp has become a spreader. And this trigger still works just the same, so you can get those fine adjustments, but that's how I'm supporting the backside of those shelves and then clamping it in place with that clamp at the front while I screw everything together. Now I take 2,000 measurements to make sure everything is in the right spot before I counterbore the legs and run a screw in to hold that shelf in the front. Now you see I'm also securing the slats in the back to the back side of the shelves, and that's just to keep things from getting wonky over time. I really want this plant stand to have a polished look, so instead of leaving those counterbore holes just empty and open to collect water over time, I'm cutting some plugs. Now if you don't have a plug cutter, no big deal. You can buy a 3/8 diameter dowel at Home Depot, chop it into little pieces, and fill those holes. Now one thing I will recommend is make sure you use a glue like Type Bond 3 that's exterior rated. That way it'll hold up over time. I've got more woodworking videos ready for you to watch right here. So until next time, let the sawdust fly and have fun making something.